Hello and welcome. Today we delve into a pivotal moment in the history of warfare, an event that challenged centuries-old notions of combat and revealed the unstoppable march of industrialized firepower. We're talking about the Battle of Tarawa in 1943, where a small island in the Pacific became the battleground for a revolutionary shift in military strategy. But what if I told you that on the 21st of November, in the dead of night, the Japanese defenders saw something they had never encountered before, a synchronized eruption of earth and sand, as if the very landscape was alive and attacking? Could a single Marine officer's weapon change the course of history? Was the weapon he wielded, the Browning automatic rifle, not just a firearm but a symbol of a new era? And how did the Japanese military's deep-rooted belief in spiritual strength and close combat prepare them, or fail them, in the face of this mechanized onslaught? Imagine a battlefield where traditional tactics, rooted in spiritual resolve and bayonet charges, collide head-on with the relentless industrial precision of automatic weapons. How did a weapon weighing 19 pounds, capable of firing over 600 rounds per minute, expose the obsolescence of centuries-old Japanese doctrines? Could the destruction of 3 heavily fortified Japanese positions in just 20 minutes, with concentrated BAR fire, be the turning point that shattered their confidence? And what does it reveal about the clash between ideals of heroism and the brutal reality of modern war? All these fragments, earth eruptions, a formidable rifle, doctrines built on spiritual strength, are pieces of a puzzle. The central question remains: how did a simple firearm come to symbolize the future of warfare and render ancient tactics obsolete? In this video, we will trace the path from traditional Japanese combat philosophy to the mechanized firepower that reshaped the Pacific theater, unraveling the myths and revealing the shocking truth behind the Battle of Tarawa. The most astonishing revelations are just ahead, so stick with us as we uncover how a single weapon and the new tactics it inspired changed the face of war forever. The story begins right now. On the 21st day of November in the year 1943, precisely at 23 hours, the scene was set on Red Beach 2, located on Betio Island within the expansive Tarawa Atoll. The tranquil stretch of sand suddenly erupted in a series of dramatic, perfectly synchronized bursts that seemed almost choreographed, a pattern of geysers of earth and debris advancing directly toward the concealed positions of the Japanese defenders. These eruptions of dirt and sand followed an eerie, mechanical rhythm, each one an impact from the relentless fire of the American Marines, striking with an unerring precision that Japanese soldiers had never before encountered in combat. From within a bunker constructed from palm logs, Japanese naval infantry soldiers peered through a narrow firing slit, their eyes fixed on an extraordinary sight. A Marine First Lieutenant named William Dean Hawkins, advancing steadily with what appeared to be an unusually large and formidable rifle. This was not a typical weapon, but a symbol of a new and devastating approach to warfare, one that would soon challenge the very foundations of the Japanese military doctrine. Despite what Japanese tactical manuals asserted, that American troops depended heavily on massed rifle fire, and that their individual weapons were less potent than the spiritual strength embodied by Japanese bayonet charges, Hawkins' actions would soon force a profound reevaluation. The Marine officer was about to demonstrate a stark new reality, one that would lead to the deaths of some 4,500 Japanese defenders over the course of just 76 hours on Tarawa. The weapon in Hawkins's hands was the Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR. Weighing in at a hefty 19 pounds when unloaded, the bar had the capability to fire 36 Springfield rounds at 2 different rates of fire. The slower setting allowed for a rate between 300 and 450 rounds per minute, while the faster setting could unleash between 300 and 450 rounds per minute, 500 and 650 rounds per minute. Each 20-round magazine was capable of being emptied in less than 3 seconds when the weapon was set to fire at its maximum rate, a feat that would have seemed almost superhuman to the Japanese soldiers watching helplessly from their bunkers. And in those critical 3 seconds, as the Japanese defenders braced for what was to come, the full might of American mechanized firepower would be laid bare, exposing the fundamental obsolescence of their traditional tactical doctrine. The ensuing chaos and destruction on that beach would be echoed across countless islands scattered throughout the Pacific. It marked the collision of two contrasting military philosophies, one rooted in the ideals of spiritual strength and close-quarters combat, cherished by the Japanese, and the other based on industrial efficiency, mechanized firepower, and mass production, characteristic of the American approach to warfare. The Browning automatic rifle was not merely a firearm, it was a tangible embodiment of American innovation and the industrialized power that had transformed infantry combat. Its deployment at Tarawa illustrated how American military principles, built on mass production and technological advancement, could upend traditional notions of courage and individual heroism. The Japanese soldiers, who had been trained to believe that sheer spiritual determination could overcome material disadvantages, soon discovered that such ideals alone were insufficient in the face of relentless automatic fire delivered with industrial precision. Within 20 minutes of Hawkins initiating his assault, his scout sniper platoon managed to clear 3 heavily fortified Japanese strongpoints using concentrated fire from their BARS. The battle for Tarawa had commenced with a decisive demonstration of firepower that directly contradicted every lesson the Japanese had been taught about warfare. Their military doctrine, rooted in triumphs from battles against China and Russia, was now revealing its limitations in the face of modern, industrialized combat. The Japanese Imperial Army had entered the Pacific War with a set of tactical doctrines largely unchanged from the early 20th century. Their infantry manual of 1909, a manual still in use in 1943, dedicated 17 pages to the power of spiritual energy and bayonet combat, yet devoting only 2 paragraphs to the use of automatic weapons. Their military philosophy placed enormous emphasis on sashin, a concept of spiritual power that could transcend material disadvantages, suggesting that a highly motivated soldier with enough resolve could defeat enemies through sheer will alone. This was not mere propaganda, but a deeply ingrained element of their military science. The Japanese army believed so strongly in the superiority of spiritual strength that their training reflected this conviction. The Army Infantry School at Chiba claimed that a single Japanese soldier possessed the fighting capacity of 3 Chinese or 2 Russian soldiers solely on the basis of their spiritual superiority. While the Japanese military were aware of the existence of automatic weapons, they had their own light machine guns, such as the Type 96 and Type 99, of which around 41,000 Type 96 and 53,000 Type 99s were produced during the war period. However, these weapons were not uniformly deployed nor integrated into a doctrine that could match the destructive potential of American automatic rifles. Despite the production of their own light machine guns, the Japanese military's tactical doctrine continued to emphasize close combat, bayonet charges, and spiritual fort. During the turbulent years of the Second World War, a significant shift in infantry tactics and weaponry was underway, fundamentally transforming the battlefield dynamic. Military strategists and combat units alike began to recognize that firepower, particularly automatic fire, could often be more decisive than individual acts of bravery or traditional combat maneuvers. This realization prompted military planners to adopt a new approach, equipping squads with multiple automatic rifles, which were regarded as specialized support weapons necessitating their own dedicated crews. This strategy was designed to maximize the volume of suppressive fire that infantry units could deliver, thus overwhelming the enemy and reducing the vulnerability of individual soldiers. Contrary to this innovative doctrine, the Japanese military worldview struggled to grasp the concept of equipping every infantry squad with multiple automatic rifles. To the Japanese military elite, combat had traditionally been based on individual valor and close-quarters engagement, rather than a concerted effort to concentrate firepower at the squad level. This fundamental misunderstanding would ultimately prove catastrophic in the fierce encounters that followed, as Japanese soldiers on numerous islands would encounter American infantry units boasting far superior automatic firepower. In these engagements, Japanese troops often found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer volume of suppressive fire wielded by American squads, who possessed more automatic rifles than entire Japanese platoons had in the past. A central element of this disparity was the widespread use of the Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR. Throughout the war, the United States produced these weapons at an astonishing rate, and the BAR came to symbolize the technological and tactical edge that American forces held. The design of the bar was a product of ingenuity, originating from John Browning's development efforts during 1917, with refinements made during the interwar years. Its mass production during the war, in quantities that Japanese military planners could hardly comprehend, revolutionized infantry combat. The bar endowed ordinary American soldiers, those who previously relied solely on standard-issue rifles, the firepower that had once been the exclusive domain of crew-served machine guns. With this weapon, individual infantrymen could deliver sustained automatic fire, transforming the unit's offensive and defensive capabilities. By late 1943, American manufacturing facilities were producing BARs at an unprecedented pace. Factories in the United States operated at full throttle, turning out weapons in quantities that defied Japanese expectations. The New England Small Arms Corporation alone produced approximately 168,380 BARs over the course of the war, an extraordinary feat of industrial efficiency. Meanwhile, the IBM Corporation, known in Japan primarily as a manufacturer of business machines, had retooled its factories to produce 20,000 BARs, demonstrating how diverse industries contributed to the war effort. Additional manufacturers, including the Marlin Rockwell Corporation, played vital roles, bringing the total American wartime production of the BAR to nearly 350,000 units. These numbers effectively shattered Japanese assumptions about manufacturing capacity and technological dominance. For the Japanese military, this level of production was almost incomprehensible. Their traditional approach to weaponry involved meticulous hand-fitting of each Type 66 machine gun in workshops where skilled craftsmen spent weeks working on a single weapon. This artisanal method stood in stark contrast to the mass production techniques employed by the United States, which prioritized quantity and consistency over individual craftsmanship. The disparity in approach reflected larger differences in military philosophy and industrial capacity. The effectiveness of American automatic weapons was vividly demonstrated by servicemen like Marine Sergeant John Basilone, who became a Medal of Honor recipient for his actions during the Guadalcanal campaign. During October of 1942, Basilone operated both machine guns and BARs, deploying them to great effect. In one notable engagement, he and his fellow Marines repelled an attack by approximately 3,000 Japanese soldiers, showcasing the destructive potential of American automatic firepower against human wave tactics that the Japanese often relied upon. This confrontation illustrated that American small units, equipped with multiple BARs and machine guns, could employ automatic fire immediately, without waiting for the slower process of setting up machine gun teams, thus gaining a crucial tactical advantage. The specifications of the BAR alone tell only part of the story. It fired the powerful .30-06 cartridge, capable of delivering high-impact rounds at a rate that could reach up to 650 rounds per minute. Its effective range surpassed 1,000 yards, making it a versatile weapon for various combat scenarios. Yet what truly set the BAR apart was the doctrine of employment it represented, the democratization of firepower. This doctrine empowered every Marine rifle squad, by 1943, to have 3 bars at their disposal, ensuring that automatic fire support was inherently part of the squad's tactical capacity. Similarly, every Army infantry squad was equipped with at least 1 BAR, making automatic firepower an organic and immediate component of small unit operations. This approach eliminated the need to rely exclusively on designated machine gun teams and allowed for instant, coordinated suppression of the enemy. The significance of this development was perhaps most vividly demonstrated during the first major American offensive in the Pacific Theater, which took place on August 7, 1942. It was during the Battle of On, a night filled with relentless chaos and the deafening roar of automatic weaponry. The battlefield was illuminated by a network of interlocking fields of fire, with numerous machine guns strategically positioned throughout the Marine line. These positions included specially placed BAR, Browning automatic rifle, nests, which played a crucial role in repelling the Japanese assault. Among the Marines, Private First Class Albert Schmid became widely recognized for his heroic actions during that night's intense fighting, highlighting the valor of individual soldiers amid the broader chaos. However, it was not the actions of a single individual that secured victory. Rather, the entire defensive setup, especially the coordinated fire from all automatic weapons, including the 12 BARs distributed across the rifle companies, worked in unison to turn the tide of battle. Each bar gunner had been meticulously trained to fire in sustained 6-round bursts, roughly lasting about 1 second, before shifting their position to avoid becoming easy targets, thus maintaining a constant volume of suppressive fire. As the Japanese forces charged forward, aiming directly into the flashes of muzzle fire, they encountered emptiness where defenders had expertly concealed themselves. The relentless American gunfire kept them off balance, disrupting their advances and causing devastating casualties. In that conflict, only 128 soldiers from Ichiki's original force of 917 remained alive, illustrating the brutal effectiveness of American firepower, numbers that starkly demonstrated the lethal efficiency of their defensive strategy. To quantify the Japanese fire potential, a rifle squad of 13 men equipped with bolt-action Arisaka rifles could, under ideal conditions, fire approximately 65 aimed rounds per minute. In stark contrast, a Marine squad armed with 3 bars could unleash around 150 rounds within the first 4 seconds of contact, well before the Japanese soldiers could work their bolts for a second shot. Confronted with such overwhelming automatic fire, the Japanese response was to retreat into subterranean concealment, seeking refuge in underground fortifications to avoid the devastating barrage. By the late months of 1943, the Japanese had developed intricate cave systems that became central to their island defense strategies. These weren't merely simple holes or basic hideouts. Instead, they represented complex underground fortresses composed of multiple interconnected chambers, tunnels, and fortified firing positions that could interlock fields of fire with each other. These underground networks were regarded as virtually impregnable by Japanese military doctrine, requiring enormous artillery strikes or costly direct assaults to break through and neutralize the defenses. The introduction of the BAR fundamentally shifted this equation, providing Marines with a powerful new tool capable of undermining the perceived invulnerability of these subterranean strongholds. On November 22, 1943, during the Battle of Tarawa, Marines encountered the first sophisticated Japanese cave defenses, marking a turning point in their tactics. A new and effective technique quickly emerged as standard procedure. Marines would approach these cave systems from an oblique angle, aiming to minimize exposure and maximize the chances of suppressing defenders. They would position a bar gunner approximately 25 yards from the entrance and fire a continuous stream of rounds, sometimes a full magazine, into the cave opening in a distinctive figure-8 pattern. This tactic maintained relentless suppression, exploiting the physical properties of the ammunition and the environment itself. The physics behind this method were straightforward but immensely destructive. The 36 rounds fired from the BAR retained lethal velocity even after ricocheting multiple times within the confined spaces of the cave. A single burst delivered into a cave entrance could produce a hazardous environment, with bouncing projectiles filling the chambers with unpredictable ricochets. Marines found that firing a 20-round magazine into such a space generated what they called a hornet's nest effect. Bullets ricocheted off walls, ceilings, and floors in chaotic patterns that made survival impossible for anyone trapped inside. Japanese soldiers, who had trained extensively to hold these positions to the death, soon discovered that death arrived long before they could even glimpse their attackers. Victory for the defenders was increasingly impossible once these tactics were employed. By June 15, 1944, the United States was engaged in the Battle of Saipan, situated in the Mariana Islands. The Japanese defenders had spent months meticulously preparing their defenses, drawing lessons from the earlier battles at Tarawa and Guadalcanal. Approximately 31,000 Japanese soldiers had entrenched themselves in what they considered impregnable positions, believing their fortifications would withstand any offensive. They studied American tactics with great care and prepared for every conceivable assault, except for one: the overwhelming power of the automatic fire provided by the Marines' BARs and other machine guns. By the time American forces arrived at Saipan, Marine tactics had significantly evolved to maximize the effectiveness of the BAR. Each rifle company was reorganized around dedicated BAR teams, ensuring that automatic fire support was central to their combat strategy. The official doctrine now prescribed a ratio of roughly 1 BR for every 4 Marines, a testament to how vital these weapons had become in the evolving battlefield. Unofficially, Marines often scavenged and acquired additional BARs whenever possible, transforming smaller. The remarkable evolution of small arms during World War II, particularly the development and deployment of the BAR, or Browning automatic rifle, transformed infantry tactics and battlefield dynamics. These weapons became more than mere firearms. They evolved into mobile, formidable platforms capable of delivering sustained automatic fire, fundamentally altering how soldiers engaged with the enemy. The importance of these weapons was vividly demonstrated during the intense Battle of Purple Heart Ridge on the island of Saipan, where their effectiveness was on full display amidst brutal combat conditions. During this fierce engagement, the Japanese defenders had constructed a network of mutually supporting defensive positions within the complex coral limestone caves that littered the terrain. These positions, carefully interconnected and strategically placed, were believed to be nearly impossible to bypass or flank, presenting a formidable obstacle to the advancing Marines. Nonetheless, the American forces relied heavily on their automatic weapons, including the BAR teams, which played a crucial role in breaking these defenses. Marine Private First Class Harold Agurm, although not primarily assigned as a BAR gunner, exemplified the heroism and dedication needed in such desperate circumstances. Despite the chaos of combat and heavy enemy fire, Agurm managed to evacuate 45 wounded Marines from the battlefield, a selfless act that earned him the posthumous Medal of Honor. His actions embodied the spirit of the Marine Corps and demonstrated how the coordinated effort of BAR fire teams enabled the Marines to hold their ground, suppress enemy positions, and continue the fight despite overwhelming odds. The scale of the U.S. Marine effort at Saipan was staggering. Over the course of just 3 weeks, the 2nd Marine Division alone expended an incredible tally of approximately 8,700,000 rounds of .30-06 ammunition, most of it delivered via the BARS and supporting machine guns. This prodigious output illustrated not only the ferocity of the battle, but also the sheer volume of automatic firepower that American infantry units brought to bear. The relentless volume of gunfire had far-reaching implications beyond immediate physical destruction. It inflicted a profound psychological impact on Japanese soldiers who faced a stark mathematical reality. American industrial strength meant that the United States could produce vastly more ammunition than Japan could muster soldiers, creating a situation where the Japanese defense, no matter how well prepared, was ultimately unsustainable in the face of overwhelming firepower. As the battle raged, the sound of this automatic fire evolved into a psychological weapon in its own right. The unique, rapid thudding of the bar's cyclic rate, distinguishable from the more chaotic sound of traditional machine guns, signaled that fierce, mobile, and hunting firepower was close at hand. Veterans recalled that hearing multiple BARs opening up simultaneously was akin to a rolling thunderstorm, an unmistakable auditory cue that overwhelming fire support was pouring down upon the enemy. This auditory assault served as a form of psychological warfare, instilling fear, confusion, and despair among Japanese troops, undermining their morale and fighting spirit. This psychological advantage was further amplified by the rigorous fire discipline ingrained in American Marine training. Unlike the stereotypical image of indiscriminate, wasteful spraying of bullets, Marines were trained to fire short, controlled bursts that maximized accuracy while conserving ammunition. This disciplined approach meant that each burst of automatic fire was not merely a suppression tactic, but often resulted in casualties, each controlled, precise shot effectively killing or wounding enemy soldiers. The strategic value of this disciplined firing was recognized and emphasized, as it allowed American units to sustain their offensive momentum and inflict maximum damage with limited resources. By the middle of the year 1944, intelligence derived from captured Japanese documents revealed that their soldiers had been instructed to identify and prioritize eliminating the American BAR gunners during combat. These weapons were seen as vital, forming the backbone of American small unit tactics due to their ability to deliver sustained, accurate fire in offensive and defensive operations alike. The Japanese command understood that targeting these automatic riflemen could significantly diminish American firepower and combat effectiveness. However, pinpointing and engaging BAR gunners in the chaos of battle proved almost impossible. These gunners were constantly moving, taking advantage of terrain and cover, and each Marine squad often operated with multiple automatic rifles, making it difficult for the Japanese to identify and neutralize the threat. On February 19th of the year 1945, during the invasion of Eniwetok, this challenge became even more acute. The Japanese had been facing American firepower consistently for 3 years by then, and General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding roughly 21,000 defenders, had meticulously studied each previous encounter. His defensive strategy relied heavily on complex, interconnected tunnel networks stretching over 11 miles underground, representing the pinnacle of Japanese cave warfare, designed to frustrate and withstand the relentless American assault. Yet the Marine Corps had also evolved their tactics in response to these formidable defenses. From bitter experience, Marines developed specialized techniques for employing the BAR in offensive operations. The forward deployment of automatic rifle squads became standard doctrine, with the automatic riflemen taking the lead in advancing and suppressing enemy positions while riflemen maneuvered to out. The man was leading his machine gun squads forward in the heat of battle, full of determination and resolve, when he was suddenly struck down by a mortar shell. He had survived some of the fiercest and most brutal encounters of the Pacific War, fighting through dense jungle, fierce island assaults, and relentless enemy fire, only to fall during the very first hours of a critical engagement. At Iwo, the fighting was intense and unforgiving. From an original Japanese garrison numbering roughly 21,000 soldiers, only 1,083 men were taken prisoner in the aftermath. The vast majority of the defenders had perished in place, many of them sealing themselves in caves to escape the relentless barrage, only to be overwhelmed by the advancing forces and the devastating firepower brought to bear upon them. During those relentless 36 days of combat, the Marines expended an estimated 12 million rounds of small arms ammunition. To put that into perspective, the American military, specifically the 28th Marine Regiment, responsible for assaulting Mount Suribachi, consumed approximately 90,000 rounds of .30 caliber cartridges within just 5 days of fighting. The fierce battle for Okinawa began on the very 1st of April in the year 1945, marking one of the bloodiest and most sustained campaigns of the Pacific Theater. The final decisive confrontation on Okinawa laid bare the overwhelming dominance of American automatic weapons. The Japanese 32nd Army, tasked with defending the island, had mobilized around 130,000 soldiers, including Okinawan conscripts, who had meticulously prepared their defenses. They had studied every lesson learned from previous battles, attempting every conceivable tactical adaptation to ensure their survival. Yet despite their efforts, they were up against not only Marines armed with Browning automatic rifles, but also an industrialized American war machine that had perfected the mass production, distribution, and deployment of automatic firepower. By the time of the Okinawan campaign, the United States had manufactured well over 300,000 Browning automatic rifles, a staggering number that exemplified the country's capacity for war production. Some American units had even discarded traditional organizational structures, opting instead to operate with a ratio of 1 BAR for every 2 or 3 soldiers, emphasizing firepower over formality. The 96th Infantry Division, for example, reported carrying significantly more bars than their authorized allotment. Soldiers understood that in this brutal conflict, survival depended heavily on the sheer volume of automatic firepower they could unleash. Colonel Hirami Yahara, a senior staff officer of the Japanese 32nd Army and one of the few high-ranking officers to survive the battle, later provided post-war accounts describing the overwhelming material superiority of the Americans. While his writings do not specifically mention the BAR, at least not in verified translations, his accounts of the fall of the Shuri Line, the main Japanese defensive position, emphasized that the Japanese defenses crumbled not only because of massive assaults, but also due to the relentless, methodical application of American firepower. Cave after cave, position after position, was systematically cleared by automatic weapons fire, illustrating how the Japanese had prepared for a spiritual or ideological fight, but found themselves confronting the brutal realities of industrial warfare. The story of the Browning automatic rifle became inextricably linked with the industrial capacity of the United States. While Japanese soldiers sought refuge in caves and fortified positions, American manufacturing capacities accomplished what would have been unimaginable to Japanese planners, producing weapons on a scale that seemed almost miraculous. In 1941, IBM's factory, located in Poughkeepsie, New York, which had previously specialized in manufacturing typewriters and calculating machines, was converted to produce BARS. By the year 1944, this facility had already produced 20,000 BARS, each one tested and calibrated to tighter tolerances than any Japanese hand-fitted weapons of the time. The bulk of wartime BAR production was carried out by the New England Small Arms Corporation, which produced a total of 1,380 units, a remarkable feat of American industrial mobilization. Meanwhile, the Marlin Rockwell Corporation, which had limited experience in weapons manufacturing prior to 1941, built new facilities specifically dedicated to the production of these automatic rifles, further expanding the United States manufacturing capacity. Even internationally, efforts were made. Carl Gustaf's Stads factory in Sweden, a prominent arms manufacturer, acquired a license to produce BARS and reportedly offered to sell them to Japan through neutral channels in 1943. The Japanese military attaché stationed in Stockholm investigated this possibility, hoping to procure the weapons. However, Japan lacked the necessary foreign currency reserves and shipping capacity to capitalize on such opportunities, ultimately preventing acquisition of the American firepower that was proving so decisive in the Pacific theater. During the tumultuous years of World War II, the United States' industrial capacity for small arms ammunition and automatic weapons far outstripped that of Japan, highlighting a stark disparity in military logistics and technological preparedness. This imbalance was vividly illustrated through production figures that revealed the sheer scale of American manufacturing compared to Japanese output. The total number of Browning automatic rifle units produced by the United States, estimated at roughly 350,000, was significantly larger than the combined Japanese production of the same type of light machine guns. Specifically, Japan's production included approximately 41,000 units of the Type 96 and 53,000 of the Type 99, illustrating a stark industrial gap. In fact, American arms manufacturing was so prolific that the number of BARS produced was nearly 4 times greater than the total number of all Japanese light machine guns combined. The effectiveness of these American weapons depended heavily on a steady and abundant supply of ammunition, representing yet another remarkable industrial achievement that was largely incomprehensible from the Japanese strategic planning perspective. Each American BAR gunner in combat typically carried between 12 and 15 magazines, which translated into roughly 240 to 300 rounds ready for immediate use. This substantial ammunition load was supplemented by supplies distributed throughout entire squads, exemplifying the comprehensive logistical support that enabled sustained firepower during engagements. A standard Marine rifle squad could stow away around 2,000 rounds of BAR ammunition, in addition to the rounds allocated for individual rifles. Throughout the war, American ammunition plants demonstrated extraordinary productivity, manufacturing billions of rounds of small arms ammunition. While an exact figure of around 21 billion, 36 million rounds remains difficult to verify independently, estimates suggest that the United States produced approximately 47 billion rounds of various types of small arms ammunition during the conflict. This vast output ensured that American forces were never faced with shortages, even during periods of intense combat where ammunition expenditure reached levels that Japanese troops, suffering from resource scarcity, could hardly afford. A clear example of the staggering consumption of ammunition was evident during the Battle of Okinawa, where the U.S. 10th Army reportedly fired an estimated 60 million rounds of small arms ammunition over the course of just 82 days. The 24th Corps alone documented firing 25 million rounds of rifle and machine gun ammunition during that campaign. In stark contrast, Japanese defenders typically had a limit of 100 rounds per soldier for an entire battle, facing an enemy capable of expending that same amount in mere seconds. These figures underscore the profound disparity in firepower and logistical support between the two sides. Behind these cold statistics lay the human toll inflicted by the relentless use of automatic weapons, transforming ordinary soldiers into casualties of industrialized warfare. The total number of Japanese military deaths in the war is estimated at approximately 2,300,000, according to official Japanese government statistics compiled in the aftermath of hostilities. However, detailed research by Japanese historians suggests that roughly 60% of these casualties, around 1,400,000, died not directly from combat, but from starvation, disease, and the harsh conditions of prison camps and war-related hardships. The remaining deaths in Japan's military forces resulted from a combination of combat-related causes, such as artillery, aerial bombardments, naval gunfire, and small arms fire. While it remains impossible to attribute specific losses solely to the use of the BAR or other automatic weapons, their contribution to the American firepower advantage was undeniable. In the vast expanse of the Pacific theater, American forces frequently inflicted casualties at ratios exceeding 10-1, a ratio largely attributable to their superior firepower capacity rather than numerical superiority alone. This advantage was the result of meticulously developed logistical support systems, technological innovation, and tactical doctrines that maximize the destructive potential of American automatic weapons. By mid-1944, U.S. Marines had refined standard operating procedures specifically tailored for cave clearance operations, strategies that capitalized on the lethal efficiency of the BAR and related automatic weapons. These procedures, derived from combat experience across various Pacific islands, ranging from Tarawa to Saipan, recommended a systematic approach. Marines were instructed to position their BAR gunner at an oblique angle relative to the cave entrance, maintaining a safe distance of approximately 25 yards. The method involved firing a full magazine in a controlled, deliberate pattern to suppress defenders effectively, using white phosphorus grenades to mark successfully cleared caves. Continuous suppression during infantry advances was critical in reducing enemy threats and enabling safer extraction of personnel. Repeated thousands of times across Pacific campaigns, these procedures transformed what was once close quarters, desperate combat into a methodical, mechanized process of clearing fortified caves and tunnels. The Japanese, who had meticulously designed their cave defenses to maximize killing zones for attacking forces, initially believed that their extensive underground fortifications would offer a formidable obstacle. However, the American tactics and firepower capabilities, especially the use of automatic rifles, like the BAR, turned the Japanese defenses into deadly traps for their own soldiers when subjected to systematic concentrated fire. The relentless application of American firepower, supported by industrial-scale ammunition production and innovative tactics, ultimately shattered Japanese defensive strategies and contributed. The battlefield was often a deadly maelstrom, with soldiers caught within the lethal zones of death chambers, where armor-piercing rounds ricocheted unpredictably throughout confined spaces. The differences between American and Japanese automatic weapons were not merely a matter of numbers. They extended far beyond simple quantity, encompassing profound qualitative disparities that had significant implications on the battlefield. The American Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR, epitomized decades of rigorous industrial development, embodying a level of manufacturing expertise, mechanical precision, and mass production efficiency that Japan's firearm industry simply could not replicate at the time. This distinction was rooted in a long history of refined production techniques, where American factories had perfected processes that allowed for consistent quality control and rapid mass production. In contrast, Japanese light machine guns such as the Type 96 and Type 99, which were their closest counterparts to the BAR, demanded crews of 2 men to operate effectively. These weapons carried additional weight, approximately 19.5 kilograms for the Type 96 and about 21.5 kilograms for the Type 99, especially when equipped with a bipod, and suffered from recurring manufacturing flaws. Japan's manufacturing model, heavily reliant on small-scale craft production within workshops, lacked the capacity to achieve the tight tolerances and precise dimensions needed for reliable automatic fire. As a result, Their weapons were often plagued by mechanical problems. Springs would break, extractors would malfunction, and feed mechanisms would jam under operational stress. The fundamental metallurgy, which plays a crucial role in the durability and reliability of firearms, further underscored these disparities. The American bar utilized chrome molybdenum steel, a durable alloy that allowed sustained firing without warping or losing structural integrity. Conversely, Japanese weapons were made from inferior steel, which necessitated careful heat treatment by skilled artisans to achieve even minimal reliability. Such meticulous craftsmanship was incompatible with the demands of mass production, rendering Japanese automatic weapons less dependable in combat. The American approach to manufacturing produced weapons that were not only superior in quality, but also available in greater quantities at a faster rate pace than their Japanese counterparts. This technological and industrial advantage translated directly into battlefield effectiveness, where quantity and dependability could often outweigh the capabilities of individual weapons or tactics. The introduction of the BAR transformed the concepts of infantry combat, shifting the emphasis from individual marksmanship to a systematic and coordinated application of firepower. American soldiers trained in traditional rifle shooting, focusing on precise aiming and controlled fire, quickly learned that their automatic rifle counterparts, often called gunmen, adopted a different, more aggressive tactic: walking fire. Instead of aiming meticulously, they would aim in the general direction of a target area and then walk their rounds onto the target by observing the impacts of their fire. This firing method, which was impossible with bolt-action rifles, allowed for rapid suppression of enemy positions and was particularly effective at denying terrain to Japanese soldiers who relied heavily on concealment and camouflage to execute infantry tactics. A bar gunner, utilizing this method, could pour a continuous stream of fire across an entire hillside from a single magazine, forcing the Japanese soldiers hiding in the terrain to either reveal themselves or perish in place. This concept of area denial, where firepower could be used to block and control large sections of terrain rather than aiming for individual targets, represented a fundamental shift in infantry tactics. It neutralized the tactical advantage of Japanese concealment and disrupted their carefully prepared defensive positions. The Japanese military doctrine, which heavily emphasized precise shooting and stealth, struggled to counter this new paradigm of fire-based area denial, and their tactical doctrines never fully adapted to these new realities. The effectiveness of the American firearm advantage, particularly the BAR, was fundamentally tied to logistical superiority. Maintaining such an extensive level of firepower in combat required a vast and intricate supply chain stretching back to the United States. This chain involved factories, freight trains, cargo ships, and forward supply dumps, all working in concert to ensure a constant flow of ammunition and spare parts to frontline units. This logistical feat was so formidable that it defied the expectations of Japanese military planners, who had anticipated American supplies would be exhausted early in campaigns. Instead, the Americans demonstrated that their supply system could sustain and even increase their firepower over time. For example, a single Marine regiment engaged in combat could consume roughly 40,000 rounds of small arms ammunition each week. To support such consumption, dedicated supply ships would make regular runs from American ammunition plants along the West Coast to supply bases scattered across the Pacific theater. Once landed, these supplies required complex infrastructure, ports, handling facilities, storage warehouses, and transportation networks to be effectively distributed to units on the ground. The scale and sophistication of this logistical system were staggering, representing an investment of resources that far exceeded Japan's entire military budget. At the large and strategically vital Ulithi Atoll, which was developed into a sprawling naval logistics hub in the year of 1944, American logistic troops managed immense quantities of ammunition daily, ensuring that frontline units remained well supplied regardless of the campaign's duration or intensity. The concept of military superiority during the Second World War was not solely dependent on the number of weapons or soldiers, but deeply rooted in the contrasting cultural philosophies that shaped each nation's military approach. At the core of this divergence was a fundamentally different understanding of warfare itself. Japanese military culture, strongly influenced by the ancient samurai code, placed immense value on personal combat, individual bravery, honor, and spiritual strength. These ideals fostered a tradition where soldiers regarded their weapons as sacred objects, symbols of their allegiance to the emperor, treated with almost religious reverence. Every sword, rifle, or piece of equipment was not merely a tool, but a sacred extension of their honor and duty. This spiritual reverence often led to meticulous, almost ritualistic maintenance of their arms, with soldiers dedicating time and effort to repairs as acts of devotion. In stark contrast, American military culture, which evolved from the principles of industrial democracy and mechanized production, prioritized efficiency, firepower, and technological advantage. For American troops, weapons were viewed primarily as reliable tools, material assets designed to maximize combat effectiveness through mass production and standardization. When an American soldier or Marine's rifle malfunctioned or was damaged, it was simply replaced with a new one from an abundant supply, reflecting a pragmatic attitude rooted in industrial capacity. The American approach to weaponry and combat training embodied this philosophy, emphasizing repetitive drills, standard operating procedures, and a factory-line mentality that aimed to produce soldiers with instinctive, efficient responses in battle. Training at major military installation sites like Camp Pendleton and Fort Benning exemplified this ethos. Marines and soldiers learned to wield their weapons, particularly the Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, through rigorous repetitive exercises. They practiced firing thousands of rounds, undergoing hundreds of hours of instruction designed to develop lightning-fast reflexes and automatic responses. Each Marine during their training was required to fire at least 2,000 rounds in various drills, mastering techniques such as instinctive shooting, walking fire, and rapid magazine changes, often in less than 3 seconds. This extensive training was only possible because of America's enormous industrial capacity, which allowed for the mass production of weapons and ammunition, enabling soldiers to fire more rounds in training than Japanese soldiers might encounter in their entire service. In contrast, Japanese soldiers faced severe shortages of ammunition, often only firing fewer than 100 rounds during their entire training period before being sent into combat. The lack of sufficient training and logistical support meant that many Japanese soldiers entered battles poorly prepared to wield their weapons effectively. The final campaigns in the Pacific Theater, most notably the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, vividly demonstrated the overwhelming firepower of American automatic weapons. Despite the Japanese defenders' strategic use of terrain, fortifications, and tactical ingenuity, they were ultimately powerless against the relentless volume of fire generated by American automatic weapons, particularly the BAR and other machine guns. The statistics from these final conflicts vividly illustrated the brutal reality of modern industrial warfare. On Iwo Jima, the Marines expended an estimated 12 million rounds in just 36 days of combat. The Battle of Okinawa, lasting 82 days, saw the use of approximately 60 million rounds, with the VTI Fight Thief Corps alone reporting about 25 million rounds fired. The vast majority of this ammunition was delivered through automatic weapons, which allowed a relatively small number of American troops to sustain continuous, overwhelming fire against entrenched Japanese positions. The Japanese defenders, already suffering from shortages of food, water, and medical supplies, found themselves trapped in a brutal cycle of constant bombardment, unable to break out or effectively counterattack, dying under a storm of bullets delivered with industrial efficiency. These figures and battles laid bare a stark truth about modern warfare. The power of industrialized production and automatic weaponry had fundamentally reshaped the battlefield. Every Japanese soldier faced a barrage of hundreds of bullets, equivalent to what an entire rifle company might have used in old-fashioned warfare, all delivered by the combined might of industrial logistics, mass production, and automatic fire. While the atomic bombs that ultimately ended the war are often remembered as the decisive factor, they overshadowed the more immediate revolution, namely how industrial capacity and technological advancement created a new kind of battlefield, one dominated by the relentless, mechanized power of automatic weapons. The overwhelming firepower demonstrated during these campaigns made it clear that Japan, with its limited industrial capacity and shortages of munitions, was destined to face inevitable defeat. The conventional weapons, like the BAR, had already proven that the tide was turning. The destructive power of these weapons, combined with the enormous logistical support that sustained their use, highlighted the fundamental shift in warfare. Industrialized armies could inflict devastating damage with unmatched efficiency. In this context, the atomic bombs, although catastrophic, were merely the final culmination of a long-standing evolution that had begun with the industrialization of war, transforming the battlefield into a landscape of relentless, mechanized destruction. During the course of the Pacific Campaign, a staggering number of Japanese soldiers, estimated at around 200,000, lost their lives in the fighting. However, it is crucial to recognize that conventional weapons, such as rifles, machine guns, and artillery, had already caused far greater casualties on both sides throughout the grueling years of combat. In particular, the strategic insights of Admiral Suimu Toyota, who served as the Navy Chief of Staff, became increasingly clear during the final Imperial conferences, where he acknowledged that Japan's defeat was virtually inevitable, primarily because the United States' overwhelming superiority in conventional military power alone rendered any hope of victory unattainable. The deployment of atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki undeniably hastened Japan's capitulation, but their impact did not fundamentally alter the existing military and industrial landscape. The core challenge faced by Japan was an inability to compete with America's immense industrial capacity for producing weapons and ammunition. This disparity in production capacity meant that the Japanese military, despite its determination, could not match the sheer volume of arms supplied by the United States. After the war, American military officers and industrial specialists who visited Japan conducted detailed examinations of the Japanese war effort, uncovering the true magnitude of American manufacturing power. These investigations revealed that the United States produced approximately 350,000 M1 Garand rifles, often called the BAR, a nickname derived from Browning automatic rifle, during the war years. To put this in perspective, this number was nearly 4 times greater than Japan's entire combined output of all types of light machine guns over the same period. In 1944, each of these American BARs cost around $75 to produce, which at that time was a significant expense, yet it was a small price to pay for the weapon's battlefield effectiveness. Meanwhile, Japan's own Type 96 machine guns, which were a standard issue for their infantry, were far more costly in terms of materials and labor. Despite the higher costs, these Japanese weapons often delivered inferior performance compared to their American counterparts. When American factories reopened and expanded their operations in the post-war years, particularly during the 1950s, Japanese industrial delegations visited these facilities, seeking to understand the secret behind American manufacturing excellence. They observed assembly lines, standardized parts, rigorous quality control procedures, and the systematic approach that together produced vast quantities of reliable, effective weapons. These industrial techniques, mass production, process standardization, and quality assurance, had been the cornerstone of America's military superiority. While Japan struggled to produce inferior, handcrafted alternatives to the American automatic weapons, military historians have concluded that the widespread adoption and deployment of the BAR, along with other automatic firearms, underscored the futility of Japanese resistance tactics during the war. The weapons symbolized a fundamental shift in modern warfare. It made clear that industrial capacity and technological innovation held far more strategic significance than traditional notions of warrior spirit and hand-to-hand combat. This realization demonstrated that in contemporary conflicts, military power was dictated by a nation's ability to produce large quantities of advanced weaponry, not solely by the bravery or martial virtues of individual soldiers. The presence of overwhelming firepower and the ability to supply it continuously meant that no amount of courage or tactical ingenuity could bridge the gap created by industrial disparity. Dr. Edward Dreer, a respected historian specializing in the Pacific War, emphasized that American automatic weapons fundamentally transformed the nature of infantry combat in the Pacific theater. They rendered previous tactics and resistance strategies ineffective, as the enemy could equip every squad with automatic rifles, supply unlimited ammunition, and replace losses instantly. Factors that decisively tilted the battlefield in favor of the United States. The statistics from the Pacific conflict strongly support this analysis. Over the entire duration of the war, Japanese forces inflicted approximately 111,000 American casualties across all causes, a significant number, but still a fraction of the losses they suffered themselves. In stark contrast, the Japanese suffered the loss of approximately 2,300,000 soldiers, an overwhelming ratio of more than 20 to 1. While multiple factors contributed to this staggering disparity, the superiority of American automatic weapons and the industrial might that produced them played a pivotal role in shaping these outcomes. The influence of the BAR extended far beyond mere battlefield success. It also catalyzed profound societal changes in Japan. The weapon that had contributed to Japan's military defeat ultimately demonstrated the power of industrial democracy, a system rooted in technological innovation, mass production, and efficiency. In the years following the war, Japan experienced an economic revival driven by companies founded by veterans who had witnessed firsthand the might of American industry. Iconic corporations such as Honda, Toyota, and Sony emerged from this era, applying lessons learned from observing American manufacturing techniques to rebuild and transform Japan's economy. These post-war Japanese entrepreneurs understood that true national strength did not derive from military conquest or vast armies alone, but fundamentally from industrial capacity and technological prowess. Japan's remarkable economic miracle was, in part, a direct consequence of this realization, an acknowledgement that winning the future depended on harnessing the principles of scientific management, mass production. In the wake of the tumultuous period of industrialized warfare, a profound transformation took shape, particularly evident in the history of the Japanese self-defense forces and their evolving relationship with American military aid. When in the 1950s, Japan's newly established self-defense forces began to receive military assistance from the United States, they were equipped with a range of American-designed weapons, among which the Browning automatic rifle, commonly known as the BAR, played a prominent role. During that decade, roughly 10,000 of these weapons were supplied to Japan through various military aid programs, symbolizing a significant shift in the nation's military landscape. The Japanese soldiers who trained with these weapons found themselves confronting a paradox. They operated the same firearms that had previously been wielded by their former enemies during the fierce conflicts of the past. This ironic situation marked not only a practical military development, but also a symbolic moment, an evolution from the aggressive militarism that once defined Japan's national policy to a new era of alliance and cooperation with what it now called an industrial democracy. This transition reflected a broader societal and political reorientation, turning former adversaries into allies bound by shared interests and mutual understanding. Over the subsequent decades, veterans from both sides, American servicemen and Japanese former soldiers, began to meet at various historical sites across the Pacific, engaging in reconciliation ceremonies aimed at healing old wounds and acknowledging the realities of their shared history. At these gatherings, the former enemies candidly exchanged their personal wartime experiences, offering insights into how these deadly weapons had shaped their lives and perspectives. American veterans, many of whom had operated or faced the BAR, listened openly as Japanese infantry survivors recounted their own accounts of combat, revealing a remarkable level of candor and mutual respect. These exchanges uncovered an essential shared understanding that both groups had been caught in larger forces, systems beyond their individual control, that propelled them into conflict. The American troops wielding the Browning automatic rifle represented the cutting edge of industrial democratic military technology designed for maximum firepower and efficiency, while Japanese soldiers, often disciplined within a traditional military structure rooted in feudalistic principles, found themselves subordinate to the relentless technological advancement of their adversaries. The clash between these two fundamentally different systems, industrial warfare on one side and military feudalism on the other, resulted in catastrophic tragedy with staggering loss of life across the Pacific theater. However, this collision also served as a catalyst for transformation, prompting reevaluations of military strategy and national purpose. In a poignant memorial ceremony held on Betio Island in 1995, marking the 50th anniversary of a pivotal battle, American and Japanese veterans laid wreaths side by side at memorials, symbolizing reconciliation and respect. During these solemn moments, they recognized that the very weapons responsible for vast destruction had, paradoxically, helped bring an end to the war, and in doing so, facilitated the rebirth of their nations. The Browning automatic rifle, once an instrument of relentless combat, had inadvertently become a symbol of liberation from militarism, a testament to the complex legacy of industrial warfare. Examining the historical impact of the BAR reveals the enormous scale of wartime production and the technological disparities that shaped the Pacific conflict. The production figures alone vividly illustrate this point. Approximately 350,000 BARS were manufactured during the war, compared to around 41,000 Japanese Type 96 light machine guns and about 53,000 Type 99 machine guns, an order of magnitude advantage favoring the United States, with a ratio of approximately 3.7 to 1. The combat statistics further underscore this disparity. In the Battle of Tarawa, over 3 million rounds of ammunition were fired within a span of just 76 hours. The campaign on Saipan saw an astonishing 15 million rounds expended over 3 weeks, while the Battle of Iwo involved 12 million rounds in less than a month. The climactic Battle of Okinawa, one of the largest and bloodiest in the Pacific, witnessed an astonishing 60 million rounds discharged within approximately 82 days. These figures highlight the relentless intensity of the conflict and the overwhelming firepower wielded by American forces. Casualty statistics provide additional context. Overall, in the Pacific theater, the ratio of Japanese to American deaths was roughly 20 to 1. Japanese military fatalities numbered about 2,300,000, with many casualties resulting from starvation and disease. Another approximately 1,400,000, accounting for nearly 60% of their total deaths. Combat-related deaths from all causes among Japanese forces stood at an estimated 900,000. These staggering numbers tell a story of industrial asymmetry in warfare, an imbalance so profound that no amount of individual heroism could fully alter the course of events. America's capacity to outproduce and outfire the Japanese was astonishing. To maintain their superiority, American forces could have lost 10 Browning automatic rifles for every Japanese automatic weapon available, yet still retained technological dominance. American troops could have fired hundreds of bullets for each weapon Japan possessed, making the battlefield an arena of overwhelming American firepower. This, in the wake of Japan's military confrontations with Western powers, it became evident that success on the battlefield was increasingly dependent on modern firepower, particularly automatic weapons that could unleash rapid, sustained rates of fire. This realization spurred China, studying the failures and setbacks faced by Japanese forces, to undertake a comprehensive overhaul of its own military structure. They recognized that to match the technological and industrial might of their adversaries, they needed to embed automatic weapons at the very core of their military doctrine, transforming traditional combat approaches into something rooted in industrial-scale firepower. Even Japan's self-defense forces, when first established, adopted a strategy that placed automatic weapons at the foundation of infantry tactics. This shift was neither superficial nor incremental. It symbolized a complete transformation of Japan's military establishment. The movement from relying solely on individual marksmanship and personal bravery to embracing the devastating potential of mechanical firepower exemplified how warfare had entered a new era, one where victory was increasingly determined not by the skill of a single soldier, but by the collective industrial capacity of a nation. The evolution of warfare reflected broader societal shifts, moving away from the valor and spiritual power of the warrior ethos toward the supremacy of mechanical advantage and mass production. Traditional notions that heroism alone could secure victory gradually gave way to an understanding that a nation's strength was rooted in its ability to produce and sustain vast quantities of advanced weaponry. The battlefield had become an arena where the instrument of war, the firearm, became a symbol of this transition, with the lessons inscribed in the blood of Japanese soldiers who learned painfully that courageous individual efforts were insufficient against the relentless industrial might of American forces. One prominent figure in this history was General Tomoyuki Yamashita, a Japanese commander whose career spanned both remarkable victories and devastating defeats. Known for his leadership in battles such as the conquest of Singapore and the subsequent struggles in the Philippines, Yamashita's experience encapsulated the full range of Japan's fortunes during the war. In 1946, he was executed for war crimes, but before his death, he reflected deeply on the reasons behind Japan's defeat. He came to the sobering realization that Japan had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of modern warfare. This insight was shared by many Japanese officers who survived the conflict, recognizing that victory in modern war depended on more than mere bravery or traditional tactics. They understood that the so-called bar, a symbol of American firepower, represented more than just a superior weapon. It embodied a comprehensive systemic advantage, an industrial democracy's capacity to mass-produce the essential tools of war while maintaining high standards of quality, innovation, and reliability. Japan's military tradition had championed individual valor and the warrior's spirit, but when confronted with the realities of industrialized conflict, such ideals proved inadequate. The war revealed that the relentless machinery of American industry, capable of producing vast quantities of sophisticated weapons, was a decisive factor in their defeat. Captain Mitsuo Fuyita, who commanded the attack on Pearl Harbor and later survived the war, became a Christian evangelist and reflected on the underlying strength of American military power. He understood that weapons like the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, demonstrated American superiority not through the prowess of individual soldiers, but through a systematic, organized application of industrial capacity. Every BAR was a product of American factories, logistics networks, and training systems, an emblem of a society mobilized for industrial warfare. Today, in military museums across Japan, relics of World War II, particularly American weapons, are preserved and displayed as historical artifacts. These include the BAR, recognized for its central role in the Pacific conflict. Japanese visitors, especially younger generations unfamiliar with the war firsthand, study these weapons to better understand how their nation's militaristic ambitions were ultimately thwarted by the power of industrial democracy. The lessons are clear and enduring. In the modern era, national strength is derived not from martial spirit or individual courage alone, but from the capacity to produce and sustain advanced weaponry on a vast scale. Victory in contemporary conflict hinges on systematic organization, massive industrial output, and technological innovation, factors that dwarf the significance of personal bravery or spiritual fervor. The bar, in its symbolic and practical role, taught Japanese soldiers that the path to victory was paved with factories, logistics, and organized effort, lessons painfully learned at the cost of blood and sacrifice. These lessons contributed to Japan's transformation from a militaristic empire driven by heroic ideals to a peaceful, prosperous nation built on economic strength and technological prowess. This process of transformation was, in no small part, shaped by the harsh realities faced during the war, especially by confronting the devastating power of American automatic weapons. The bar didn't just wipe out Japanese soldiers on the battlefield, it fundamentally dismantled Japanese militarism itself. It proved conclusively that victory in modern combat depended more on industrial capacity than on spiritual power or individual heroism. In this way, the war became a lesson etched into history, one that underscored the critical importance of technological innovation and large-scale production as the true determinants of the final chapter of the Pacific War was written on the battle-scarred landscapes of Okinawa, a fierce confrontation that would mark the end of Japan's organized resistance in the Pacific theater. Among the key figures in this tragic conclusion was Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushima, who commanded the Japanese 32nd Army during that decisive clash. As the inevitable defeat loomed on the 22nd of June in the year 1945, Ushima chose a path of ultimate sacrifice, committing ritual suicide alongside his chief of staff. His last orders, delivered with clarity, acknowledged the hopelessness of continuing resistance against an enemy that wielded overwhelming superiority in all facets of modern warfare. Ushima's death symbolized more than personal sacrifice. It signified the final collapse of organized Japanese resistance on the islands of the Pacific. The formidable American forces that had faced him possessed unmatched advantages across every domain, from artillery to air power, naval gunfire to automatic weapons. Among these technological marvels, the Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, stood out not merely as a weapon, but as an emblem of a profound industrial transformation that made victory in the Pacific inevitable. The scars left on Pacific Island cave entrances, still visible today as dark, bullet-riddled openings, serve as stark monuments to the clash between two contrasting military philosophies. Embedded within these scars is the story of how the American automatic rifle did more than win battles. It embodied the dawn of a new era in warfare, one driven by industrial power rather than individual heroism. The relentless firepower of the BAR and similar weapons echoed across the islands, not just as harbingers of victory, but as symbols of the industrial age asserting its dominance over traditional martial virtues. The battlefield, once a domain of personal valor, was transforming into a theater where mechanized efficiency and technological supremacy defined the outcome. Japanese soldiers, fighting in the concealed darkness of caves, often fell victim to ricocheting rounds from weapons they never saw coming. Their tragic deaths bore witness to the ruthless efficiency of modern industrial warfare, a system that relied on mass production and technological superiority rather than individual bravery alone. The legacy of the BAR in the Pacific was thus not only one of victory, but also one of transformation. It represented a fundamental shift in how nations understood what constitutes true power in an industrialized world. Every burst of automatic fire taught a grim lesson to those Japanese soldiers who paid the ultimate price, a lesson etched into the very landscape of the islands. The Browning automatic rifle demonstrated that in this new era of war, traditional notions of martial valor were no longer sufficient. War had become a contest of production and technological innovation, where the most efficient factories and the most advanced weaponry determined the fate of nations. This lesson was written into the countless cave entrances, each scarred by bullets ricocheting through darkness, striking soldiers who believed that the spirit of individual combat could triumph over cold steel. With the death of that old belief, a new Japan emerged, one that recognized that true national strength lay not in military conquest, but in economic development and industrial prowess. The horrific lessons learned in the hellish caves of Guadalcanal and Okinawa had forever altered the understanding of warfare. It was not the willingness to die that guaranteed power, but the capacity to produce and innovate. The mechanized industrial approach to war had proven its dominance, rendering traditional warrior virtues subordinate to the relentless march of technological progress. The story of the BAR across the Pacific is ultimately a narrative of how industrial capacity can triumph over warrior tradition. It is a tale of mass production overcoming individual courage, of factories and technological innovation shaping the destiny of nations. The countless cave entrances, each one bearing the scars of ricocheting rounds, stand as silent witnesses to this transformation, reminding us that soldiers who believed in the supremacy of spirit over steel paid the ultimate price. Their sacrifice marked the death of that old ideal, giving birth to a different Japan, one that understood genuine power derived from economic strength, technological advancement, and industrial ingenuity. This new Japan, forged in blood and fire, came to realize that victorious nations are those that harness industrial capacity rather than mere martial valor. War in this new age rewards not the bravest soldiers, but the most productive factories, those capable of mass-producing weapons and materials on a scale previously unimagined. The scars on Pacific Islands narrate this painful yet enlightening truth, that the future belonged to those who could blend technological innovation with industrial might, fundamentally reshaping the conduct of warfare. Each bullet-riddled cave entrance stands as a testament to the brutal lesson that no amount of spirit or personal valor could withstand the relentless power of industrialized firepower. The soldiers who believed they could triumph through sheer will were witnesses to their own demise, and in their deaths, a new understanding was born. The old Japan, rooted in warrior tradition, gave way to a pragmatic nation that recognized true strength lay in economic and industrial development rather than in the romantic ideals of combat. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, the bloody history written in bullet holes, the capacity to generate firepower that could decisively influence the outcome of a battle was vividly demonstrated through the deployment of the Browning automatic rifle. This formidable weapon served as a stark lesson in the brutal realities of warfare, communicating a message that no other language could convey. In war, overwhelming force is often the only language that matters. Its formidable firepower, rapid firing capability, and relentless accuracy embodied a force that was both undeniable and lethal, leaving no doubt about the destructive potential of modern weaponry in the theater of combat. The deployment of the Browning automatic rifle underscored a lasting truth. When it comes to conflict, the ability to deliver devastating, sustained violence has the power to decisively alter the course of battles and shape the outcome of wars.